Good afternoon. It is 12:48 p.m. on Sunday, April 1st, 2018. Um, both Easter Sunday and April Fool's Day. I guess happy Easter or April Fool's Day for whichever one you celebrate. I don't know. It's Sunday, so I am going to continue my rewatch of Ghost in the Shell standalone complex. This is episode 20, uh, and the title Vanished Medication. I always lose that subtitle. Review. And so this is the first of a series of complex episodes that will finish out the season where we're finally going to deal with and resolve the Laughing Man case that we haven't touched in a little while. Not since the last episode we had was on this case was in the Forest of Pupae, which was all the way back in episode 11. So it may have been a little while, but we recall in that episode the last part of this case we saw was when Togasa had infiltrated this medical facility where people who um, people who were essentially like having difficulty, like pathologically addicted to the net and so on. And he discovered kind of a conspiracy there and met this boy who had initially seemed like he was just one of the patients there, but then it was eventually fairly conclusive that something connected to the Laughing Man was happening there, and maybe that kid was actually the original. And in particular, in this episode is where he finally draws the connection between the fact that the sign he found, the painted sign that repeated the quote that's part of the Laughing Man's logo, but had the actual next line from the book there too, instead of just the part that's on the logo. And because the Laughing Man case has been one where there's so many copycats, it's hard for them to try to sort out, like, if something seems to be a clue towards Laughing Man activity, but is he just another copycat? But this one, Togasa is saying, well, but this one has more from the original book. So maybe that's an indication that it's not just a copy from someone who only knew the original stuff. And he's also talking about how, the difficulty they've had is that they know that the Ministry of Health was hacked during all of this, but the problem with trying to steal electronic data is that the original data is still there. So there's no way to find out, like, well, what did they look at? And to therefore make some conclusion about what their motive was for stealing information. And so he's thinking, well, okay, this Laughing Man, if we think about back to the original Laughing Man incident, is that this kid or whoever it is still has super hacking ability, and yet he still physically kidnapped a guy with a gun, which is just, they're saying that's a little bit strange, right? Why, with someone who has this super duper hacking ability, would he stoop to that level of physical violence and the sort of desperation that's indicated by his body language in that incident? And so he's thinking something else is going on here. Maybe just like the quote included lines from the original, maybe what they're looking for is something that is, he wouldn't trust any electronic data because he knows full well how easily it can be manipulated. So maybe he tried to steal physical information printed on paper. And we know that's true because the episode opens with a janitor in one of these big warehouses storing a bunch of documents. We opened with them in kind of a daze, taking a specific binder from a specific box and then just carrying it right out of the facility. And there's actually a shot of the security guard watching this janitor carry their little trash bin out off the facility, which I can't help. Like, we see them notice, But I'm thinking that security guard really ought to be fired. Like what? So, something weird is obviously happening and you didn't do anything about it. But okay. Anyway, so it seems clear that this janitor's brain was hacked in order to make them steal this physical document. But we don't know what it is yet at this point. We just know that someone has done it. And, because of context clues, we can conclude, yeah, that seems like it's maybe the Laughing Man. So we know that Togus is on to something. And it's interesting. I like the scene between him and the Major a lot where everyone is aware that Togusa is still really pushing to try to keep investigating this case, even though they don't really have any leads. And everyone's thinking, well, yeah, but, Togusa kind of blew that undercover operation. Maybe he's determined here for the wrong reasons. Like, is he just pissed off that he got, that he didn't catch his guy back then? So the Major kind of talking him through it and them discussing, like, well, okay, the Salinger angle, what does that mean? And the idea of the originals versus the copycats, and the idea of the physical documents versus electronic. And then she basically just, it's revealed kind of at the end of that conversation that she's kind of just feeling him out to try to get a sense of why are you really doing this. And she concludes that his motives are pure here, that he just feels certain that there is something that they're missing and that a additional investigation could really uncover something, and that's his motivation, is that he wants to solve the case. It's not personal. And so she tells him to go ahead. She basically, says, all right, you convinced me, go for it. And then we get a little bit of a fast forward, not even a montage, of him apparently spending at least several days going through this warehouse because, the lines are basically saying, most people would have given up after several days, indicating that he didn't give up after several days. But all he seemed to be doing was just kind of going through and doing a physical inventory of the documents that are there, and then using the computer software to say, okay, well, is there anything that should be here that isn't? And turns out what's missing is a list of people who received a certain vaccine for a disease called cyberbrain sclerosis. And we may recall cyberbrain sclerosis is the disease that Aramaki's friend died from. And in particular, as Togusa looks into it, the history of this vaccine, it was a vaccine that seemed promising, and yet the government board didn't approve it, their reasoning being that we don't really understand how it works, and that's not good enough. But it also seemed clear that the competing micro-machine technology treatments, there was some pressure that those should keep going, even though they're imperfect. And we can recall that earlier in the season, in the earlier complex episodes, we recalled that Serrano Genomics micro-machines were definitely involved in this whole thing. And that was the guy that was originally kidnapped by the Laughing Man. That was this whole idea that micro machines were placed in police officers without their knowledge, all of that sort of thing. That was all the stuff that started off the season. So what are we, this is where, Togusa is saying, okay, well, what is the, connection here? Why would anyone want this information specifically? And it's not necessarily clear, but the lady there at the warehouse suggests that the Sunflower Society, which is a nonprofit that sounds like it's determined to try to say, yeah, something's fishy going on with this vaccine. The government maybe didn't approve it for corrupt reasons. And they're trying to force companies to divulge this information with lawsuits. It sounds, though, when Togusa goes to talk to them, like they haven't had a lot of luck until now, because they just received this secret list of information, and we say, oh, okay, so we know now Togusa is onto something, right? Because now we've confirmed someone stole this specific document and gave it to the Sunflower Society, and Togasa is there talking through and finding out, look at all of these very important people that got special permission to use this non-approved vaccine. And so obviously we can put together that sounds like the conspiracy here is for financial reasons to benefit the micro machine industry. This vaccine that actually works better was suppressed, but because it actually works better, the important people, the VIPs, who know that it actually works better, some of them, if they develop this disease, they want the good stuff, even if they are also involved with trying to make sure that nobody else gets it. And we can see on this list, lots of very important people got it. But here's where we get the action sequence that finishes the episode and leaves us on a cliffhanger, is that someone is infiltrating the building and doesn't want this information to get out. And we get a little bit of conflicting information because the guy at the Sunflower Society says that one of the CEOs who was involved with this conspiracy is who provided this document and is willing to testify. But then later we see that guy talking to another person in the conspiracy, and he's insisting that it wasn't him, and that he has no idea how this happened. He didn't make the copy. Why would he do this? But so we know that it's probably true that this guy wasn't really involved because we know it's the Laughing Man who actually got this document. We learned that there's a copy, that this one that the Sunflower Society had was a copy, so the original is somewhere. And where is it? We don't know. But men with machine guns break in and start shooting everybody in this building, and Togasa is alarmed after taking down a couple of them to learn they actually work for the government. They're like they're the DEA, essentially, like doing a raid. And he's saying this is obviously super shady because we can imagine that, knowing what we do about what's actually going on here, it seems unlikely that there's a legit reason for this raid. And so Togasa tries to help this guy get away with the copy of the document, but unfortunately the guy is killed, and Togasa himself is seriously injured but manages to get away. There's a little bit of fishy business where he does not call out to the Major or Aramaki to say he's been shot until after he's already been bleeding very badly and gotten further away. Like, it's not clear why he didn't call sooner. I mean, we could hand wave that there was some sort of a signal blocker, in the area that would have interfered with that, but I don't think they actually said that. In any event, we're left knowing for sure now that something is seriously going on around this vaccine. There's a conspiracy, but will Togasa be able to tell them what he learned because he's shot? Is he going to be okay? We'll see. We'll see. So, in any event, I'm excited to talk about these last several episodes just because the Laughing Man case, as I've said, is definitely the part of the season that I kind of remember and think about. And so we'll be back next week to talk about episode 21, Left Behind Trace Eraser. And I'll talk to you tomorrow for 5 more minutes.